Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Rida Shafiq, and I lead the strategy team here at EGMAT. And I'm so excited to host this session today with Stanislav. But before we really dive in, just to make sure if everyone can hear me, see me, and also see the both of us, right? It would be great if you could just hit a yes in the chat box. All right, wonderful. So, hi everyone, and welcome to today's interview session where we delve into the not so talked about struggles of achievers and common misconceptions that GMAT test takers and MBA applicants tend to have. And today we're joined by Stanislav, who is a GMAT 760 scorer and has got into HEC's Master of Finance program in the round four of applications. So, hi Stanislav.
Hi Rida, thank you for having me today.
Yes. So he's here with us today to really give back to the community, talk about his journey from start to finish, all the way from the beginning of his GMAT prep to how he actually got into this Dream B school. So before we really dive into either the GMAT or the MBA part of your story, it would be wonderful, Stanislav, if you could give us an introduction to yourself.
So yeah, I graduated from Kyiv National University in 2021, where I majored in international finance and economics. That's top Ukrainian university. And then I started to work as a corporate finance analyst in this industry, and I decided that okay, I need to broaden my horizons, and it would be great if I could apply for top tier masters in finance program worldwide, ideally somewhere in Europe. And therefore, I needed to pass a GMAT and decided to pass a GMAT to enhance my application for sure, because it is necessary. And therefore, started to prepare and went from 500 to 760, I believe.
Wonderful. So you've come a long, long way, and it would be great if all of us can help this story go even further by, hitting that like button and putting down your comments as we go through. We'll be taking all of your questions, so make sure to put those in the chat box as well, so that you can get all the answers to really ace the GMAT, right? So, with that being said, let's start by first delving deeper into your GMAT prep. So, as your mentor, I know you've put in a whole lot of effort into your preparation. You started out at a 500 with a V14 and then moved all the way to a 760 with a V42. And on the way, you made sure that you really focused on the quality of your preparation and you were tracking the metrics to ensure success. So, can you really help me understand what the biggest challenges of your preparation were?
Yeah, I believe the biggest challenges are failures on the quizzes, because after every 30% accuracy on quiz, I started to feel like I'm not for the GMAT. And my logic just works differently, and maybe better to stop that and focus on something else. Uh, so yeah, it really failed attempts really destroy confidence in taking GMAT and in believing that I could score high. So I believe that that was the biggest difference, the biggest challenge. And moreover, for sure, when I started my preparation, I kind of tried to search for some stories where non-native speakers went from 500 to at least 700, and these stories were not common. So usually when people scored something like 700 plus, they started with 600, something like that. So like 200 improvement were not very common. It was also like not good, not bad, but I understood that it is not I understood that it is a major improvement actually.
Mhm. But I'm glad to see that that didn't really deter you in any way. You saw that, okay, maybe there aren't a whole lot of these stories now. But I think the good thing is that now you are one of those stories. You serve as proof to people that, yes, this is possible, the score is achievable, you can go this far. So I think that's the really, really great thing, right? So you mentioned a little bit, right, that as a non-native speaker, you really struggle to find these stories. And the amazing thing is, like I said, you improved by a massive 28 points on the GMAT verbal section. So for you, what was really the key steps to this verbal success, and how do you think that other non-native speakers can, replicate the kind of success that you've had?
Yeah, so the key driver for my verbal success, I believe, was to identify what was wrong, what was the key reason behind my poor performance on verbal. Yeah, as you said, my starting ability was P14. I actually took my first mock on MBA.com in August 2021, I believe. Yeah, received 500. And what actually happened is that I could not understand the passages, like even half of them, I believe. So it was really hard for me to read fast and comprehend at the same time. Passages contained a lot of unfamiliar vocabulary,
Hmm.
words, and so yeah, it was not even about comprehension. I could not even understand the factual information from the passages. So it was hard for me to solve TOEFL IELTS reading passages.
Hmm.
But when I when I saw what happened on the GMAT, so you can imagine that it was really a challenge. And as a result, I decided just to improve my English abilities, uh,
Hmm.
focused on that first. Uh, yeah, and kind of improved that.
Hmm.
And then after improving my English reading skills, I went to and decided to prepare for the GMAT itself.
Hmm. Got it. So between August and when you started your GMAT prep, you mentioned that you focused on building your English skills, right? So how did you really go about that?
Yeah, I started to prepare actually for TOEFL, especially for reading section, because I
Hmm.
also needed to study for TOEFL to pass the TOEFL and because it was required on every master's application.
Hmm.
Yeah, I read a lot of passages, memorized vocabulary. Also, I read articles on The Economist, especially
Hmm.
essays section, because uh, essays essays are different from news because
Hmm.
essays are structured in a way that there is always some debate about some scientists. There is some profound elaboration in them. So I decided to select this kind of topic on The Economist,
Hmm.
and I also read articles, opinions, I believe, on the Wall Street Journal.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, and made a point of reading every day in
Hmm.
English for sure. And yeah, I believe in April 2022, I uh, decided to purchase a GMAT subscription and took my first Sigma X mock and
Hmm.
scored 570, I believe. I'm not sure about
Hmm.
that, but verbal quant score was the same, Q50
Hmm.
42, and
Hmm.
verbal score improved to 25. So
Hmm.
so on the assumption that they are pretty similar, we can conclude that my verbal ability improved significantly, quite significantly, yeah, to 25
Yes.
from 14, yeah, like 11 points.
Hmm.
Uh, so
So yeah.
just by improving my English level abilities.
Mhm. And the way you went about this is, I think, a real flip on the way that most people do it. Most people will prepare for the GMAT first and then really tackle the TOEFL or the IELTS. But I think tackling things the other way around helped you, like you said, set that base for verbal success. And also, I think the most important thing to take away is the consistency that you put into your improvement journey. You didn't just read once a week, twice a week, every day. You said you put in time, and this just really shows the value of that consistency. So that's really, really well done, right? But okay, so you've taken those first steps, right? You've set yourself up for success. Now you really want to tackle the GMAT itself and GMAT style questions. So how did you approach that part of your journey? How did you approach starting off with verbal GMAT prep?
Yeah, actually, I created my GMAT study plan,
Hmm.
then decided to go with verbal first.
Hmm.
I tried to figure out what is better to start with, quant, or it is better to start with verbal, but verbal was my really weakest part, and I
Hmm.
decided that okay, quant, I can manage that. I want to start with the part that I'm not sure about, with my weakest part. I was really curious about that,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, decided to start with verbal.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so went through master comprehension course, then critical reasoning, then sentence correction, and then reading comprehension. Yeah.
Got it. And throughout all this, I know you work to really build key processes, key skills, and that really was essential to get to that score, right? That methodology to tackle different question types. So how important do you think it is to have that methodology for getting to a great GMAT score?
Yeah, I believe that methodology is essential. It is not possible to score high without
Mm-hmm.
methodology, I believe. Even those students that can get who can get really high GMAT score without preparation, I believe that they have just their internal proper methodology. uh, yeah, but it is, I would say, therefore it is not possible to improve significantly without building decent foundation skills.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Got it. Right. And I think another thing that goes along with methodology is really metrics, right? And understanding where you stand and how you stand. And I know that through your journey, you know, quizzing and scholaranium, those two things were really important, right? So how do you really look at metrics when you look at your GMAT prep and quizzing and scholaranium as a whole?
Yeah, first of all, since I failed my first quizzes in Scholaranium, I was a bit disappointed with myself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really painful to see. But uh, anyway, um, there is no point in worrying about the things that cannot benefit you.
Mm-hmm.
So after every failed quiz, I went back and analyzed every question.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I omitted questions that I got right and I was absolutely sure about, but those questions that I got incorrect, or those questions that I got correct but I was not sure about, where I just guessed the right answer, I reviewed all of them. Yeah, and from step to step, with the OG questions,
Mm-hmm.
with the right review strategy, with consistency, I believe. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I like improved my accuracy in every section and went
Mm-hmm.
from section to section. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's how. That's just a short version. Like how did you improve? That's the key, guys. But yeah, I know that it sounds very superficial. There are many details about
Oh, yeah. But I think it's important for people to have an idea and understanding of how to go about these things, and at least understand that this is the broad timeline pathway that you have to take. So it's important to have this kind of an information, right? So that's one thing. Now, moving on to the quant side, you're already a numbers guy. Now you're going for your master's in finance as well. So you mentioned previously that you were a little bit more comfortable overall, but still here you made a huge improvement from V42, Q42 to Q50, right? And in that journey, you went through the course in detail. So can you really tell us what your big learnings were from your GMAT quant journey? Because that's just as important a story.
Yeah, the problem with the fact that I was good in quant, that
Hmm.
the problem that I faced, it's kind of hard to understand what concepts do you need to learn and what concepts are redundant to learn, what you already know. Because when you don't know anything, it is easier to
Hmm.
start. You just can start with anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you know something and when you don't know something, the additional problem arises. You need to figure out what you need to learn and what you can skip.
Hmm.
And sometimes even within one subtopic, let's say quant subtopic, algebra, inequalities, even I can divide inequalities into different subtopics. And sometimes I was sure about some of them, but when it came to solving really advanced, hard questions, I struggled.
Hmm.
So it was the main challenge. And as a result, to sum up, I just went through every application file, just not to uh, lose anything. Maybe it was not like the best strategy in terms of time expenditure, but I decided to go like that because for a really high score, yeah, it is necessary to get all of the questions, or at least like 90% correct. So
Absolutely. Right. So you really put in the work to ensure that there weren't any gaps in your prep, in your quant
yeah,
prep especially, right?
because
You didn't have
I did
to.
not know how to sort out for sure the GMAT algorithm that
Hmm.
allows to skip some parts was really beneficial in that.
Hmm.
Uh, However, I anyway decided to go to any application file. Some concept files with basic uh, theory I skipped for sure,
Hmm.
but for application file, because you know even if I knew the concept, it is not the guarantee that I can solve like 90% of the questions correct on that concept, because solving question requires not only the concept knowledge but also the right uh, application uh,
Hmm.
abilities,
Hmm.
because GMAT is not like Olympiad math when you have 5 problems and 3 hours and you can sit and solve and think about life uh, and other stuff when you cannot solve, drink water, etc. GMAT is like you have
It's a
maximum two
sprint.
minutes per question. Yeah, you need to decide fast. If you cannot decide, it is better to skip and go forward. So it's also math, but it's a bit different. So also application abilities must be built as well.
Got it. So I'm really glad that the application files helped you take your conceptual knowledge to the next level to really tackle those GMAT style problems and really understand, you know, how can you take what you have and transform it into something else, essentially, right? So that's really, really great. So to summarize what we've learned about your GMAT prep so far is that on the verbal side, you need to get comfortable with reading. You need to be able to tackle the long sentences, and going through the course really gave you that understanding, right? You realized at some point that failure is part of this journey. You know, there are bound to be times where things don't go the way that you want, right? The scores don't match what you hope to see. But the important and key thing there is to really understand how to learn from those mistakes and not repeat them again, right? And third is that, yes, you will have some knowledge going in, and sometimes that's more of a tricky situation than you anticipated. But it's important to realize that it's all about taking what you have and taking it to the next level. And in order to do that, going through those application files really helped you level up, especially on the quant side, right? So, again, really, really great job done. So you put in the time, right? From April of 2022, it was in April of 2023, almost exactly a year later, that you
Yes.
took the GMAT for the first time. And, you know, that's when you saw this amazing score. But before we dive into the next steps, I want to take a second to just ask you about that test taking experience and what it was really like for you, because I know that it wasn't as straightforward as most might hope when taking the exam itself.
Yeah, before I go to the test taking, I just want to make a short disclaimer that guys, it is possible to achieve that even like in shorter time period, because I had a lot of gaps in my preparation. I mean time gaps. So I believe that right now, let's say, move back. I believe that it is possible in 6 months to achieve. Yeah, yeah, it's possible.
All right.
So yeah, year is like when you like really when you have a lot of gaps in terms of time.
Mhm.
Yeah, then coming back to your question, test taking experience was really great. Uh,
Mhm.
yeah, I scheduled my test on 29th of April 2023. It was Saturday.
Mhm.
I scheduled my test 4 p.m. I believe. Yeah,
Mhm.
for sure I did not solve anything on that day. Uh, the time to solve has already had already passed.
Mhm.
So yeah, yeah. Then I sat down uh, and I started with verbal for sure, as
Mhm.
I already practiced all my mock tests. by starting with verbal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was not sure about really many questions as I felt, because on the GMAT test, I already had kind of internal confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And the internal, I don't know how it happens in the other students, but my internal confidence depends on how many questions I'm not sure about. So if, let's
Mm-hmm.
say, first question I have to guess like between A and B. The second question I
Mm-hmm.
also have to guess. The third question, like, I also all answer choices seem really convincing. Then internal confidence is kind of destroyed, and
Mm-hmm.
it actually happened on the real test, because I took, and questions seem to be harder than those that I got on mocks.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was my stress and anxiety, but I don't know. It just felt like that, and I felt like, okay, I will fail this verbal part. It would be great if I
Mm-hmm.
could score like V35, V37,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, there. Fortunately, I was on time, so fortunately
Mm-hmm.
I understood that, okay, I will finish that on time, and there was no point in worrying about that. So for sure, because you cannot modify your answer choices.
What's done is done.
For,
Absolutely.
for my for my version of GMAT, I don't know about the new version, but for my version, I could not modify. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and then I had 10 minutes rest. Decided, okay, I failed verbal,
Mm-hmm.
so it is better to concentrate on quant. Then I
Mm-hmm.
sat down, started quant. The first question on quant, really medium question, not very
Mm-hmm.
hard. But I could not
Mm-hmm.
simplify the equation on inequality. I don't remember. So I just could not simplify, and therefore I had to guess it. Yeah, because I looked at the clock, and I spent 2.5 minutes. So it was the best strategy to guess, to skip, and
Mm-hmm.
move forward. Yeah, so I did that. As I trained on my during my preparation, that okay, if I could not solve something in 2.5 minutes, then something is wrong with my approach. Something is really wrong, and there was no point in struggling with that. So I went forward,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, solved other questions. As it turned out,
Got it.
fortunately, most of them correct, I believe.
Yes, to get to that Q50, I think we can very
Yeah,
safely
yeah,
assume
yeah. I'm likely
most of
to
them were
solve
correct.
other
Right.
questions properly.
Yes. But I think the very important thing that I want, especially our viewers, to take away from this is that you felt by the end of, I mean, you persevered through verbal, firstly, even though you weren't sure how it was going. You still continued to give your best in that section. But more than that, you continued to give your best through the rest of the test as well, where it would have been very easy for you to feel that, you know what, this test is a wash. I might as well give it again. Let me just get through this somehow and just close out the exam. But I think that perseverance and that will to do the best, even in a bad situation, is something that we can all really take learning away from and really apply into our own GMAT journeys, because it is something that, imagine where we would have been if you had given up on that quant section. The score would have been completely different. But your perseverance led you to that 716. I think that's something that deserves absolute, an applause, right? So good on you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Rita.
All right. But okay, now it's the end of April. You've got that 760, right? The GMAT journey is finally at a close. But now it's onto a more daunting path overall, admissions. And you're here with an admit from HEC with a scholarship, right? So before we dive into the process itself, can you help us understand a little bit more about why you chose this particular course and a little bit into the schools that you chose to apply to?
Yeah, I actually applied to LBS as well, to London Business School, for their Master in Financial Analysis program. I selected these programs because they are target schools for finance job recruitment in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So both in terms of rankings, different like QS ranking and Financial Times ranking, and also I analyzed information on LinkedIn on the placement of both
Mm-hmm.
schools. Yeah, and some forums, finance-related topics on the respective forums, and
Mm-hmm.
these two schools were like top of the batch. Yeah, and they are business schools. They're not kind of academic universities. And strong emphasis is put on the networking side, on career opportunities. Both
Mm-hmm.
schools have very developed career departments that
Mm-hmm.
help to land the job. Therefore, I decided to apply to these schools. Yeah, started with LBS because the deadline was earlier. It was, I believe, 15th of May for the
Mm-hmm.
latest round. It was not even round 5 at LBS. It was
Mm-hmm.
round 4. It was round 5. So it was like
Mm-hmm.
the latest. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and HEC has the deadline for the latest round, I believe, on 8th of June.
Mm-hmm.
So like 3 weeks after the LBS deadline. So I focused on the LBS first,
Mm-hmm.
then started with HEC.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So you had very little time, full-fledged time, I mean, to give to this
2 weeks,
application
two
phase.
weeks.
Two
Yeah,
weeks for LBS and then
rotate.
3 weeks after that for HEC. So how did you really strategize that time to get the maximum out of it? How much work had you done pre-May, in April and before that? And what did you really do during those weeks in between to make the most out of that time?
Yeah, for sure. I just went to the application website and figure out what essays do I need to write. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, what is required, what is not required. I also watched successful stories from other students that
Mm-hmm.
got into top business schools. Yeah, and started to write my essays. LBS has more essays than HEC, like two huge essays, 500
Mm-hmm.
words, I believe, and 4 to 5 small essays, like
Mm-hmm.
like questions for 300 words max. Yeah, and HEC has three
Mm-hmm.
essays. So I believe that yeah, LBS is tougher in terms of writing.
Mhm,
Yeah, that's it. And yeah, then I started to write it, reviewed it many times,
mhm.
actually sent it, uh, and the same with HEC.
Got it. So you made the most of that time that you had. You were really just trying to churn out these essays and writing just 1,000 words for your final admissions essay in 2 weeks is quite a feat, right? So kudos to you for that. But I'm sure that now you're just glad that that phase as well is over, right? So I'm sure that as, or even rather before you were working on this essay piece, you must have thought about your recommenders. And I know that at least for HEC Paris, that there is a recommender piece involved, right? So how did you pick the recommender that you had, and why did you do so?
Yeah, so at HEC, I was required to present two references. LBS, only one reference was required. Uh, yeah, in terms of HEC experience, yeah, I decided to select two professors, and
Mhm,
so that they could characterize me from different perspectives, because business schools look for different abilities.
mhm,
So I decided that okay, if they the references are the same, it is not the best like approach. It is
mhm,
better to the same. I mean, if they characterize me from one perspective, from the same perspective, it is better to highlight different qualities that business schools are looking for. So the
mhm,
first reference was from my academic professor, that
mhm,
was my advisor on many theses, many academic writing papers,
mhm,
and who also taught me a lot of finance-related topics. Yeah, because it
mhm,
was a master in finance application. Yeah, so it was kind of focused on my academic abilities,
mhm,
and I selected the second professor, who was my faculty advisor during like case championship when I
Mm-hmm.
was a leader of the team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it was mainly focused on the leadership abilities, etc. So
Mm-hmm. Got
on
it.
academics as well, but the main focus was on leadership abilities, as far as I
Mm-hmm.
remember.
Mhm. So they gave a very well-rounded picture of who you were and what your, top qualities and top attributes to the school really were, right?
Yeah, from different kind of perspectives, but yeah, so
Mhm.
that they complement each other. Uh,
Mhm.
yeah, not about the
That's
same. Yeah.
That's right. So, I mean, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Rather than having two people say the exact same thing again and again, you have these two people who are, giving you a more holistic, well-rounded picture of what you can offer and who you are, right? So that was a really good strategy to make the most out of that recommendation piece. So, considering that, right, what advice do you really have to give to other people who are applying for the same program or similar programs, and how can they really ensure from the time that they start their application journey or thinking about applying that they're taking the right steps to get a great recommendation?
Yeah, I kind of I don't think that like it must be an advice like, oh, I think that I will present claims and other guys can decide can what to do, what not to do. I will just tell what worked for me, and I can say that uh, I built throughout my journey. I believe, like well-grounded profile because I was good in academics, but I understood that like somewhere around 3 years ago that okay, I need to develop my other sides of my profile,
Mhm,
and I participated in different case championships.
mhm,
I did like a couple of internships in international companies. Did really well on them. Uh, yeah, and for sure prepared for the GMAT. So these experiences enabled me to have a well-grounded profile.
mhm,
GMAT 760 was also great for sure. Yeah,
mhm,
uh, and proper selection of referees and focusing, like spending a decent amount of time on the essays, so that each essay is really unique to the school I applied to. Because
mhm,
yeah, I really showed interest in that in these programs. I analyzed properly every subject taught at the program
mhm,
and what is interesting, what is not interesting, what papers were written from the professors uh, that teach any respective course. Really, like it is
deep
necessary to
dive.
dive deep. Yeah. So because to write something like I'm very motivated because your program is the best and I like to study at your school. That's for sure great, but admission officers, I believe they read thousands of applications, and every average guy can write about that. So that's necessary to stand out
Mhm,
by showing that, okay, I read some paper from this professor and it really resonated me with the ESG CAPM model. So something like that for finance.
mhm,
To show that okay, this guy knows what he's talking about and what he wants to learn.
mhm.
Yeah,
And it's not just that, right? It's not, I mean, from our previous conversations, I remember you didn't just stop at the academic side of it. You also went into the extracurriculars, especially at LBS, and how they aligned with what you could offer to them as well, if I remember correctly.
yeah, for sure. LBS also asks one of the questions was what can I contribute to the school? So it was necessary to think about what kind of experience can I bring to the school so that other participants may learn from me,
Hmm.
etc.
Hmm. Got it. Okay. So, you've written your essays, you've gotten the call back from HEC that you're ready for the interview, and the interview at
From
HEC is a
LBS
Zoom
as well.
interview from
From
LBS as
LBS.
well.
yeah,
from both schools. And that's important. I think we didn't say that, but yes,
yeah,
you're going to HEC, but that was a choice that you made. You had the
yeah,
choice
yeah,
for either one, right? You got into both HEC and LBS. So
yeah, yeah,
congrats again. Let's, that's a huge, huge feat. But I'm sure preparing for the interview rounds for both of these schools was and the next challenge for you once you'd submitted your applications, right? And it's really interviews are really a great chance for the school to understand you as a person beyond the words that you've put down on paper and analyze who you are in a communication space, in your knowledge space, all of that. And I know that again, much like with the applications, with the essays, you were again on a limited time to prepare for the interviews as well. So how did you, now that you have an admit from both LBS and HEC, how did you really ace the interview round and dazzle your interviewers?
yeah. So um, the first interview came from LBS because it is quite logical. They have a earlier deadline, so I was invited to participate at LBS interview.
Hmm.
Yeah, scheduled an interview with my interviewer. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah, and he asked me questions about my career path, etc. So, uh, like, there was nothing that surprised me, but
Hmm.
questions were really great to understand. They were aimed at what kind of person I am and
Hmm.
my abilities, my different abilities, like to evaluate my profile.
Hmm.
So yeah,
And
that's important to have a really good
hmm.
stories for any kind of ability that is tested at business schools. Great stories for leadership, great stories for solving some like out of the box problems,
Hmm.
etc. So that's necessary to tell good stories, not only when you're in bar with your friends, but when you're on the interview.
All right. I think it's just as important. I agree. So, did
Yeah.
you make some kind of a repository for these stories? Did you kind of prepare by looking at previous interview questions, or was it, how did you really approach just preparing for that interview once you'd scheduled it?
Yeah, I just created a list of the frequently asked interview questions at Harvard Business School, Stanford, London Business School,
Hmm.
and then I did, like created a story, short story, not created, but I retrieved them from
Hmm.
my experience because uh, it is when you're asked some question and you do not have time to prepare. It may be not possible for you to retrieve this story like from your experience. Yeah, so that I thought about what can I say about that, what
Hmm.
what kind of experience is suitable for this question.
Hmm.
uh, yeah, and created kind of on my list the respective
Hmm.
stories to answer on the interviews, and
Hmm.
also started practicing top-down approach communication when
Okay.
answering to the questions, for sure, when the short summary of the story is presented at the beginning, and
Hmm.
then elaboration is presented, and then
Hmm.
a short summary like result of the action is presented,
Hmm.
because it allows you to like present your flaws, present your ways of thinking like really,
Hmm.
really clearly, and the
Hmm.
interviewer can follow that, and it is more interesting for the interviewer to follow the responses that are built in that way. Moreover, it shows like in the summary you can describe the problem that you faced, and then
Hmm.
at the beginning, when you also do a summary, uh, present the result and elaborate on the actions in the middle. So that I started to practice telling the stories like that as well.
Hmm. Got it. That's a really great way to approach just storytelling as well. Having that very logical structure of you start with the summary, then you elaborate, then you give that finding or that result, or again, some part of the summary at the end. It just sandwiches that story in a way really, really well. So was the experience the same for HEC as well, or was there any difference in your interview experience and your prep
Yeah,
experience?
yeah. Just going back to my previous response, uh, that's kind of structure that management consultants apply
Mm-hmm.
when they try to respond or try to write something. And I believe that's great to everyday life as well, on the interviews, etc. Because you have clearly aligned, clearly aligned thoughts, and it is easier to figure out. And then when let's say interviewer wants to argue with you, wants you to elaborate more on something, he can. It is easy for him to develop this conversation. Yeah. So going back to HEC interview was tougher, to
Mm-hmm.
be honest, because I was asked some really profound technical questions. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the questions I was like, it was like punch in the face. Yeah, so it was a very advanced corporate finance question,
Mm-hmm.
investment banking, corporate finance. Yeah, and
The kind of question you're looking to answer down the line,
uh,
in your career. The kind of
yeah,
corporate finance question you want to answer down the line in your career.
uh, yeah, and like I was destroyed by that, uh, and interviewer saw that
Mm-hmm.
okay, I could not like answer it straight away. Yeah, and started guiding me uh, to move me from scratch to the right answer choice. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
HEC guys asks really great questions, I would say.
Uh-huh. But I mean, despite, in your own words, being destroyed by that question, they must have still been really impressed, because I mean, you're standing here with, of course, the admit, but you also have a scholarship piece that is not insubstantial. It's a really great scholarship as well. So obviously, no matter how bad that one question went, I think overall you must have done a pretty great job, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Or at
yeah.
least they think
But
so.
that question was really advanced.
Hmm. Got it. Okay. So the interview is done, and then now you're in to HEC and LBS. But on the HEC side, you got the excellent scholarship as well. So can you tell us a little bit about the scholarship and how you really got it and what applicants can do to really set themselves up to get a scholarship, especially because it is tougher overall in European B schools to get a great scholarship, right?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to the previous points completely
Mm-hmm.
because I was given that automatically uh,
Mm-hmm.
based on the evaluation of my profile and my interview performance.
Mm-hmm.
So to get a scholarship, you need everything that you need for admission, but you need to present decent results, more decent results than just to get admissions. You need higher GMAT, you need higher GPA, you need to have better work experience, or uh, it is not just the matter of what what experience do you have, but how can you present it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
So,
uh, yeah, and it was
so the
given
same
after
way
my
that,
yeah, yeah.
sorry. No, I was just saying, so the same way that you've built up this entire story for your applications, you had to build up the same story for your scholarship. And so preparing for that scholarship starts with preparing for that master's journey in itself.
Yeah. But yeah, it was given automatically, as I said. For sure, I know that for some scholarships there are additional essays required, but the strategy to
Mhm.
write these essays are the same as for application. So
Mhm. Got it. Okay. So I think, that gives people an idea that the scholarship will come only if you do all the hard work before it. You can't sit just with an admit and then wonder how to strategize that. The strategy for getting that scholarship starts way back, and you have to set up the story, you have to set up the foundation for that right at the beginning. So that's something I think is important for people to just keep in mind as well, right? So that's the piece. All right.
yeah,
So
for
now that
merit-based
we've,
scholarship, for sure be done. Yeah, because for need-based scholarship, they depend on your financial situation. It's like kind of different topic from the preparation. Yeah.
Mhm, got it. Okay. So now that we've kind of covered the length and breadth of your last year and a half almost, right? Let's really move into taking some of the questions that I see people have put in the chat. And I think we'll start way back with Apurva's question. She says she's facing problems in RC. What tips do you really have for her to tackle RC as a non-native speaker?
RC. Okay, what I did is that, as I said, I started to read really complicated essays on The Economist and tried to figure out the connection between every sentence between each other, because RC itself is focused on the ability to find connections between sentences and between
Mhm,
passages. So when I started to read some The Economist essays, I started
mhm,
all the time. I started to ask myself, okay, the second sentence, how is it connected to the first one? Usually there are different types of connection. The second sentence usually elaborates more about the first one. It may contradict the first one. It may present a new idea. So in general, while reading, it is necessary to understand the direction of the passage.
mhm,
And I kind of first of all, I did not time myself when I practiced for RC. I did not time myself until I got really decent accuracy, uh, just by reading the essays. And I
mhm,
also, by the way, I also started to read some really advanced topics that I was not sure about, because I was great at economics, yeah, because of my
mhm,
background. But when I received quantum tunneling topics, it was not easy for me to go through, even though
mhm,
many experts say that it is not that important what topic do you receive, but for sure it is much easier for me to read something about economics, because I can predict, I can see the linkages right away. So I just
mhm,
decided to read some advanced topics like about physics, astronomy, that I
mhm,
struggled the most. Uh, yeah, and it kind of helped me to be in the topic itself.
mhm,
Yeah, so I did not time myself at first until I reached the huge accuracy. I tried to read purposefully,
mhm,
tried to find the connections between sentences and between paragraphs, tried to figure out the direction and
mhm,
keywords for sure, because there are markers in RC that introduce change of the direction. For example, that's important to pay attention to the however.
mhm.
Uh, for example,
All
yeah,
those
because for
directional
example,
changes.
yeah, GMAT has great, I believe, application file about that. Because when you see, for example, it means elaboration. When you see however, it means change of the direction, uh, etc. So that's kind of general piece of advice. I cannot give like any profound tip, because the diagnostics must be undertaken to understand what is wrong. That's kind of
Absolutely.
general tip, how I went from my initial ability to the top.
Absolutely. And that's good advice, right? And Apurva, just building up on that, all of Stanislav's tips will only help you if you really narrow in on what the problem is that you're facing in RC, and that goes for any GMAT problem that you're facing. You have to give it a name, you have to understand why it's happening, and it's only then that even the best advice will work for you to actually fix that problem, because you have to take the right tool to fix it, to fix the right problem. And you can only fix the right problem once you know exactly what it is, why it's happening, and what you need to do in order to stop that problem from happening, right? So that's an important piece. All right. And I think Apurva's question ties in with Radhika, who asks, how did you improve on the speed of reading and get all the information in some lines? I think it's very clear that, that was just part of that RC building process, right? Where first you didn't focus on time at all. In fact, you just focused on understanding and one followed the other. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's kind of that's kind of approach was present in all the verbal preparation. So until I reached a really significant, especially on RC. So I started to read some passages without timing at all. So I could spend like 7 minutes on the passage, 10 minutes on passage and questions, just to read and understand everything. And going back to the first part of the question, how do you improve the speed of reading? You need to read as much as possible, and the speed of reading will come up naturally. That's it. But not only I would modify here. Not only the speed of reading is important, but speed of comprehension is important, I believe. Yeah. So first of all, I started untimed. Then the more I read, the more confidence I got. That's just a question of volume, I would say.
Very true. Right. So, Radhika, I hope that answers
Yeah,
your
that's just
question.
you need to read as much as possible.
So, crack open the books, essentially.
Yeah,
Right.
and for sure, if someone has struggles with reading, as I had, I just found the topics that I was interested in, because it is hard to read all the time something that is not interesting to you, because you need to give efforts. You need to go out of your desire. It is necessary to find a topic that is interesting. I read a lot about nature, for example, about landscapes. I read a lot about physics and astronomy, as I said, because it was unfamiliar and it was interesting at the same time. And I read a lot about business.
Got it. So you started with what was easier for you to invest yourself in, and then you moved on to things that didn't hold your interest as much, and that helped overall, right?
Yeah, I
Got
had
it.
ridiculous speed of comprehension, but just by volume, I read like every day. Just by volume, I increased that.
Got it. Okay. So A. Lee and asks, what were your weak points in verbal and how did you turn those scores around? That is to say, the tactics for each. I think we've covered RC in great detail now, but let's briefly look at what you did for SC and then maybe CR, right?
Yeah, sure. So for SC is kind of more structured than CR and RC, because it's more like Quant, as I said. So what I started to do is that for every like for official SC questions, for official guide questions, I went through GMAT Club as well, and I started to see how other students solve any other question. And sometimes it is important even to what I actually did. Let's say I solved like 40 questions for sets. I found one question that I got incorrect on my error log list. And okay, there are many mistakes on that. Usually there are many mistakes that can allow to eliminate a C question. Okay, that was the mistake with the verb ing form. Like verb to infinitive form should have been used in that question. Okay, that's type of mistake. And I started to analyze any other question in that batch of 40 questions and try to spot this mistake in other questions. Then the second mistake in other question, I tried to find it in any other. So that this kind of analyzing allowed me to train my eye to spot mistakes, that were similar to the previous mistakes in previous questions. And I also like to take already taken questions, because I kind of forgot something about them, and when I took them again, they were not completely new for sure, but it was the opportunity to refresh my memory, and the kind of skill of spotting mistakes fossilized. So it's just a matter, in terms of SC, just a matter of analyzing every mistake, trying to find it in other questions, trying to compare questions to see different patterns. Yeah, because sometimes it's not straightforward. So when you see ing clause in some sentence, it is not correct because it does not convey the purpose. You can also find another question that tries to trap you on that. Then you find the second, the second, third, the fourth, and you see the pattern. So then on the new question, when you see fifth new question, you can spot it. That's that's just a matter of review. Yeah, as I said in my previous interview, that reviewing was the major part of my preparation, not solving. I spent more time reviewing questions and sitting on them without timer, just analyzing them after solving. Yeah, coming back to CR, right? Yeah, that's the approach was similar to the SC. I reviewed it in the same way, and I tried to group the questions into similar patterns. So for sure, we can group some CR questions, but weakener strengthener type. By the way, in my opinion, weakener strengthener are the most difficult questions in CR. Yeah, and it is important to as well for me to as well align them and try to spot some patterns. How the conclusion is weakened in every case. And those questions that I got incorrect, okay, I got it incorrect because the answer choice actually did not weaken the assumption. It was out of scope, right? For sure, on the hard questions, out of scope and weakener are hard to distinguish. But when you have like 10 questions that are similar in terms of weakening, and you see on them one by one, you start to notice the details that allow to differentiate the proper weakener from the out of scope answer. So that's also just a matter of reviewing thoroughly and taking a lot of questions.
So review is one of the key things that you really found through your prep.
Yeah, because the number of questions is limited.
That is true. Yeah. That is true, especially for folks out here who are looking to take the Focus Edition, right? We don't have the advanced set of questions yet. It's just the OG and the reviews. So what questions you have, that are limited resource, and you really do need to use them wisely. So bear that in mind, right?
Yeah.
All right. So I think that we've answered Lee's question pretty well. Let's take Ishika's question, where I think as someone who's gone through the course pretty intensely, you'll be able to help her out. She asks, how did you manage coping with the intensive course structure that we offer, and what were the intervals at which you wrote mock exams before the actual exam itself?
Yeah, going to the first part of the question, intensive course structure. I just split my preparation hours. Let's say I have on the weekend 5-6 hour preparation day that I can spend 5 to 6 hours. I split it to different chunks, like 2 or even like 1.5 hour, and then I had rest between the sets, between my preparation attempts. Right, between the sets, I did not do anything related to the GMAT because it was not possible for me to spend 5 hours right away. And yeah, I could do that, but brain started to not to function properly. Yeah, it's like kind of overwhelming, especially on the GMAT questions because they require a lot of brain resources. So I just split it. And it allowed me to. Yeah, it allowed me to rest between my preparation parts. So yeah, it kind of helped me in terms of preparation. What were the intervals at which you wrote mock exams before the actual exams? So I took all my mocks. I took 3 mocks before my actual test, and I believe I had 1 or 2 weeks on them. So on the first day, let's say I solved the mock, and then I had the whole day analyzing it. Because I'm coming back to the MBA.com mocks. These are very relevant to what I actually received on the real GMAT. So And I did, I believe, right, that I analyzed every question, even those that I got correct. I also analyzed them with GMAT Club also. Yeah. So I analyzed every question, 2 days per mock, 1 day to solve, 1 day to analyze. And yeah, kind of in a week, I solved 3 mocks. It was like 6 days, right? Maybe I had some rest day between. I'm not sure, but
Mhm.
that's kind of
Yeah, yeah.
general pattern. 1 day to solve, 1 day to analyze. Because I was a working professional. Yeah,
Yes.
I had only evening to solve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You spent the last 2 weeks of April in that mock phase, I think. Until then, we were, working on your test taking skills, building your stamina, plugging any gaps, revising what you hadn't touched in some time. So all that pre-work allowed you to have a efficient, very smooth mock phase where the scores you got were actually very similar to what you received on the actual test as well, right? If I remember correctly, aside from the first mock, which was your first mock in after a year, right, where you got a 680, the Sigma X. On the official mocks that you took, once we'd figured out what went right, what went wrong, you scored a 760 and a 770, if I remember correctly, right?
The first was 750, then
Oh,
the second
750.
one was 730, and the third one was 760. So what I
Right.
received on the actual exam was even higher than the average and median.
So
So it was
I
even
think that
higher
just
than
shows,
yeah.
yeah. So you just took each mock as a learning opportunity and then move forward in that
Yeah,
direction.
that's kind of normal because you learn from mock to mock and you build your stamina. You also progress when you take mocks, on the assumption that they are of the same difficulty.
Difficulty.
But ability grows. For sure, it is kind of natural that the result also is higher than the average.
Mhm. Absolutely. Okay. So I hope, Ishka, that gives you an idea of how, to tackle the mock phase and just how to tackle the structure itself. It can seem difficult, it can seem a little hard, but when the whole seems really difficult, just like Stanislav said, break it down into manageable chunks, focus on one thing at a time, and take a lot of breaks, especially in the beginning, right?
Yeah,
So yeah. Moving on to our next question, and this will be our second to last question from Lord Chosen 18, who says, any tips on taking your accuracy to the next level? My syllabus is complete, but my accuracy is off.
yeah,
So he's finished learning everything, but he's not seeing the effect of what he's learned on the actual questions themselves, right?
yeah. So again, the superficial piece of advice because I don't know what causes the accuracy different deviations. But what I did is that I did not time myself when I could not reach the necessary accuracy. So I just reduced the time constraints. It's kind of because it's kind of hard when you have time constraints and you need to reach accuracy. Everything is not understandable. Everything is stressful. I had 3 failed mock attempts, so I do not believe in myself. I did not believe in myself. So I removed time constraints to improve accuracy, as I said, and then I gradually reduced timing. Yeah, and reviewed a lot of times.
And from my side, right, what I would say is that when you're looking at practicing, especially if you feel like your accuracy is off, first focus on one subject at a time, whether that's SC, whether that's CR, whether that's RC, right? And don't tackle all the different difficulty levels at once. Pick one, start from easy if you're not feeling confident, right? Aim to get something like an 85 to 90% accuracy there. Then move to medium, aim to get about a 75 to 80% accuracy. Then move to hard, where you want to be around 60, 65. And understand that as you move from easy to medium to hard, what you'll really be tested on moves from very simple application of concepts to more tricky, manipulation of those concepts, focusing on trickier logic, on really understanding how to make, for example, in CR inferences as you move along, right? Making the right kind of assumptions, doing the right kind of pre thinking to set up yourself for success. So allowing yourself to move in that slope will allow you to build these skills and practice applying these skills one on top of the other. So take things in small chunks, move one at a time, and it's only once you've mastered one thing that you should then move on to the next. So you can close that chapter with confidence and not have any worry plaguing you, right? So we hope that helps you, Lord Chosen 18. And on to our final question from SK, who asks, how many questions would you recommend to solve every day for verbal, for both SECRRC and quants as a whole? So, Stanislav, what would you say?
No, I have not counted it, to be honest, but okay. Let's treat this question as a brain teaser to calculate the time necessary.
Mhm,
Okay. So let's say I always took questions in a batch of 10 questions. So always like that, 10 questions
mhm,
per set. When I had reduced timing, I had 3 minutes per question, roughly, because for sure for SC questions are not not as time requiring as CR, for example. Let's
mhm,
say like roughly 3 minutes per question. So it's like when I had reduced timing, 30 minutes per one set. Uh, yeah, and then I had, let's say, 15 to 20 minutes to review that. So it's like 45 to 50 minutes to review. So like to review and to solve the whole set. So, and then let's say if I have 3 hour time period, we
mhm.
can divide it 3 hours by 45, 50 minutes and receive the necessary number of sets.
Yep. And it's also important to remember here, and this is something that you've said that I'll reinforce right now, is that this practice only matters, it only counts if it's valuable practice and if you treat these questions wisely, because resources are limited. So if you're moving to practice, you need to make sure that you can actually tackle the questions that you will face. So brute force practice is it's not going to help you, right? And it will not allow you to improve if you don't have the right structure, if you don't have the right feedback system, if you don't apply those learnings from one set to the other, as Stanislav has done, right? So take all of that as well. And don't practice everything all at once until you have the knowledge of everything, right? So if you've only studied SC till now, once you've finished all your SC study, then practice just SC questions. Don't dip your feet into CR and RC when you don't know how to tackle those questions yet. Then once you build that knowledge base, again, add CR to the mix. Then once you're done with RC, add RC to the mix, and then practice everything together, right? But don't do a brute force practice.
Yeah, I see
Yep.
that the way the question is built signifies that uh, the emphasis is put on the volume, but it is better not to focus on the volume, but to focus on the quality. I did not, as I said, I did not count how many questions I solved. I remember that for one question I spent 30 minutes reviewing. It was hard
Mhm,
CR question or SC question or hard GMAT passage. For sure, when I received economic topics,
mhm.
it was easier for me to figure out. But when I received quantum tunneling, it was not easy for me to understand, and I had to go to additional sources to understand. So I did not focus on that at all. I just focused on quality. Yeah, and it drove the results.
Yeah. And I mean, we can tell you how many questions that Stanislav did on the EGMAT platform. Of course, this doesn't include any OG questions you did outside. But on Scholaranium for the verbal, you've solved 488 questions. And on the quant side, this is 491. So this is inclusive of the two mock tests that you took on the platform as well. So you can see that, for the score that you've got, that might seem like a lot less questions than a lot of people might have expected, but that just draws back to the quality of learning you took away from each question and how that helped you excel, really, right?
I'm not sure whether this. I also took a lot of questions two times,
On
three
GMAT
times.
Club. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's also true, right? So that's learning done 2 or 3 times then.
So yeah,
Valuable.
yeah,
Yes.
multiplied by two. and roughly. Yeah, but reviewing is not the same as solving for the first time for sure. It's like kind of not comparable things for sure.
That's true. But I think the fact that you did review twice is also something that is very, very important to note, right?
Yeah.
But again, I think those are our questions, right? So that was, I think, really well answered, all of them. So if you love the way that Stanislav really tackled those, make sure to, like the video, add your comments. We'd love that. But overall, it's been such a pleasure having you here today. And, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your insights. And I really hope that everyone who was here today was able to gain some clarity into how to tackle the GMAT process as a non-native speaker, as someone who's looking for 200 plus point improvement, and also the admissions process and how you can really think about applying to these B schools. And if you're interested in this kind of content, make sure that you follow the GMAT channel and keep an eye out for more such sessions so that you can get the maximum possible learning, right? But thank you all so, so much.